All right, thanks for coming. My session's going to be about writing a custom TWIG filter in Drupal 8. And the way we're going to do this is create a custom module which then provides that filter as a service to the TWIG template. Hopefully this will give you a good idea about how you can extend TWIG and give you some ideas about what you could do if you need to, and basically how easy it is to do. So just a quick bit about me. My name's James. I'm a Drupal developer at ActiveArc JWT here in Helsinki. ActiveArc JWT, we're a full-service ad agency with quite a strong kind of emphasis on digital. I've been in Helsinki for a year now, and previous to that, I worked in London. Yeah, well, if you want to get in touch with me, you can get in touch at the Twitter handle there. That's also my username on Drupal.org if you want to get in touch there. So, I'm assuming everyone knows what TWIG is, right? Or, yeah? Okay, cool. Well, basically, it's replacing PHP template in Drupal 8. So, Drupal 7 PHP template, Drupal 8 TWIG. It's been mentioned quite a few times today, but it does do an excellent job at removing the back-end code, or separating the back-end code and the front-end code. So it's much easier to have your front-end guy doing stuff in TWIG and your back-end guy doing stuff, and they really don't need to know much about what each other are doing at all. There's probably other sessions that will go into more detail about TWIG and the syntax and how you do stuff. But if anyone's used any of the JavaScript templating languages like Handlebars or Mustache, stuff like that, you'll find the syntax really similar. So, TWIG filters. Can everyone see that all right, by the way? I mean, it's quite small, but you can't, right. Okay, basically TWIG comes with a handful of really useful filters and functions straight out of the box. I've got a few examples here. I'll go through them for you guys at the back that can't see. So one example is the escape filter. So we can just pass a variable through the escape filter. So we just have a pipe and then the filter. So here it's E. Really easy to remember. Lowercase, again, we can pipe a string through the lower filter, and that will then render whatever we're piping through it as lowercase. You get slightly more complicated ones like date format, so we can pass a date through, and that will then render that in whatever date format we want to. Drupal have added a few. They've done quite a good job of actually of just keeping their spin on TWIG filters to a minimum. And they've added a few that are Drupal specific. For example, where you would have used the T function in Drupal 7, you're now just piping that through the T filter. So that then presents that to the translate interface. Or one you'll also see a lot is without. So you pipe your object or variable through the without filter, and that is exactly the same as in Drupal 7 where you had hide and you passed your stuff through there. So you can also pipe filters together. So if one's not good enough for you, you can pipe them together until you get what you want outputted. So here, really silly example, but we're piping a variable through the escape filter, then lowercasing it, and then presenting it to the translate interface. I don't think you'd ever want to do that, but it just shows you that you can pipe those together. So it may come a time when the filters and functions that come with TWIG out of the box don't quite provide the functionality that you're after, in which case you can create your own custom filter. So as I mentioned, in Drupal 8 you do this by writing a custom module that then presents that filter as that's a service, which is basically a global object with some generic functionality. So I guess in the procedural programming terms, it would be like a helper function. My example of a custom filter is going to be called trim words, and all it's going to do is take a string and trim it to a given length. It's just to give you an idea of what you can do. So I'm going to do this for you now and just show you how easy it is. But basically, we're going to create the module directory and a info.yaml file, which in Drupal 7 was the .info file. Then we're going to create the class that provides the filter as a service. And then we're going to expose that. We're basically going to create another config file, services.yaml, which basically says, hey guys, this is my module, and it's providing this service in this class. And then we will write the logic that does the work of the filter. So essentially what we're doing is mapping that filter to a PHP function. It's that easy, he says. Right. Just going to try and mirror my display. So. All right. Okay, can you see that at the back, or do you want me to zoom in a bit? That's all right. Okay, great. So just to start off with, this is our node.html.twig template. So you can see the twig syntax there. We've got the node title at the top, the submitted information, then this without filter, like I was saying. So where we would in Drupal 7 in PHP template, we'd probably pass the content object through the hide function. Here we're just piping it through without, and then specifying the inner object as, or the value that you don't want to show there. So yeah. Just one quick example of one of the out-of-the-box filters. So if you wanted our node title to be uppercase, we can just pass that through upper, and let's get rid of that. Great. Every node title is uppercase. So let's just pop that back before we start. Okay, I'm just going to sit down while we code this, but okay, so we're back to normal. All our titles are just coming out as plain text. So let's create the module directory and the info.yaml. So in Drupal 8, the first thing you're going to notice is the code structure has changed quite significantly. So all of the core code base is now tucked away neatly inside the core directory, so we can pretty much ignore that now. All of our custom and contrib modules are going to go in the modules directory, which is in the root of the install. And again, all of our custom themes are going to go in there. Right, so to start with, we create the directory, which we're going to call trim string for our module. And the trim string YAML file. So this is pretty much exactly the same as the Drupal 7 info file. There's just one new parameter. So you're giving it a name, a description, a version, the core, a package, and the new parameter is type. So we're specifically saying this is a module. All right. So far, it's quite similar to creating a module in Drupal 7. Here's where it gets a little bit different. So we're creating our service, and this has to live in a specified pattern of directories within our module. So it's lib Drupal trim string, and then our entity, which is going to be a TWIG extension. This structure here is for the PSR0 autoloader, basically, which will change. It's going to be swapped to PSR4, I think, pretty soon. The only difference really for developing a module is this structure here will get a lot more simple. So within here, the TWIG extension directory, we're going to create our class, which we're going to call trim string TWIG extension. Our namespace will be Drupal. Trim string, TWIG extension. Yeah. One quick point is if anyone's going to be doing any Drupal 8 module development and isn't currently using an IDE, I would recommend doing so because it will save you a lot of time and effort. So our trim string TWIG extension class is going to extend the TWIG extension class. So this class is going to have 3 methods in. It's going to have getName, which will provide the name for the service, getFilters, which will provide an array of our TWIG filters, and we'll have a static method that does the actual filter legwork. So the first one is getName. And that's just going to return our name. Right. So just before we enable our module, we're going to create one more config file, which is the services.yaml. And all this does is basically say, here's a list of services that this module provides, and here's the class. So we've got our name and the class, which we can take from the namespace. So and we give it a tag and say, basically we're saying here this is a TWIG extension. Right, so now we should be able to go and enable our module, and hopefully it won't explode. Okay. Yes. Relief. Okay, so now we can start building up the logic that does our kind of filter. So as I said, there's 2 more methods in our class. Well, there's 3. There's 2 left to do. We've done the get name. Our second method here will be called get filters. And this is just an array of our twig filters. So we're going to call this one trim string. And this is just an instance of a twig filter function, basically. So okay, so here we have a typo. Yeah, we've got a typo. That's what we've got. This should be this. So what we're trying to get is an array of twig filters that basically map to a instantiation of a twig filter function that takes our class and then maps it to a method inside our class, which we're going to call trim string or trim sting. It's another typo. All right, so trim string is going to be a static method in our class that does the work. And being a twig filter, this will take the string as a parameter. And for now, we're just going to return some sample text, just so we can see it's working. So if everything's worked here, no, it won't. Let's just quickly pass our node title through our new filter. So if everything's worked, all our node titles should be replaced with our test text. Excellent. Right. So we've got our filter, and that's now being mapped successfully to the method in our class that trims the string. So now all we need to do is write the logic for that function. With twig filters, you can pass in parameters as well. So our first parameter is going to be the limit. And we'll set that to a default of 10. So to start with, we can split our string into parts separated by spaces. And if our parts array is less than the limit, we'll just return our string untouched. So now our dummy text should only be on the titles that are longer than our limit. Yeah, great. So now our job, all that's left to do is trim that string to the limit and pass that back. So we can just, we're going to implode our array by space and glue it together with a space. And we're going to slice up our array. And return that. Cool. So we've added that parameter. We can now pass that through our filter here. So we're limiting that now to 5. Yeah. And we can also, I think, to make this a bit nicer, we can append some text to the end. And obviously this function can get as clever as you like. I'm just really making this simple for a demo. We can trim white space off the end. We can trim characters out of it. Whatever you fancy doing, basically. Once you've got to the point of this static method, well, you can do what you like. So yeah, that is how you create a custom twig filter. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions?
What if you build a trim string function so that it accepts an array as argument? How do you pass it from the template?
Good question. I guess this parameter would take the array and then you'd go from there. So
yeah, but how do you pass the array from the template? How do you build an array in the twig template? Like this?
well, if that was an array, you would then just pipe that into the filter. And then that would become the first parameter on your static method.
Yeah, but I mean, instead of the 5 that you have there as some parameter, if that would be an array of functions, like it passed to the function.
Yeah.
How would you make that an array?
I guess you would have your variable already prepared as an array, for example, in a pre-process function, before you get to the template. So all your data would be structured as you want it before you get to the template. Is that? So you would create your array in a pre-process function, put that into a variable, and then when you get to the twig template, you already have that array, and you can pass that as a parameter.
All right, so then you couldn't change the options depending on the template?
Depending on the template.
Well, no, my question was actually how you would create an array in Twig. A bit like when you have the without filter and you pass multiple values to it. So
I guess you that would just be a comma separated string, I suppose. I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. But here you wouldn't be passing an array to that filter, you'd just be passing a list of options. So you're saying without links, without comments, for example.
All right.
Any other questions? No. Okay. Thanks.